Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera, and this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm. Rhythm is the #1 AI betting tool in the market. You've got to have it. It's an absolute key to your handicapping process. It helps you with edge. It helps you in terms of difference to market from what their projections are. And what you like, you can actually create into a model. So that way you can say, I think these are the things that are important. Maybe you're actually overweighing some of those things, and that'll backtrack it and back trace it for you. So that way you know if you created a profitable model. And you can track it all within the app, which is either on your phone or even on your desktop. You can get it for 7 days for free on me or 25% off your first month. And you can get both of those links down here in the description. Also, right now, through the end of the Super Bowl, we are running a free trial of the Huddle. You get all my plays for first and for free right now. You get my stuff, Matty Chuck stuff, Capper Penguin, and you get That Guy Bets from now until the Super Bowl for free. The biggest thing is, as you know, these lines move. We put them out, they move. It just is what it is. Sometimes when we put it out on social media, they're going to move right away, and you're not going to get the same line that maybe you got in the group. But in the group, you do have the best opportunity to get exactly what I'm betting when I'm betting it. And generally, it seems to be working for people. So I will say we've been pretty hot lately, 10-3 over our last couple days. So let's keep it rolling, and we'll do what we can here. So I'm going to include that link down below as well. And obviously, before we get into the plays, be sure to like, subscribe, share this with your friends, leave a comment. It helps with the algos. So definitely appreciate it. Couple different things. Obviously, we have the NBA trade deadline. We have the Super Bowl this weekend. Lot of things going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a little bit of a cross-court specials thing that they have on DraftKings. We'll see if there's a couple more up there. But there was a play that I thought was interesting. There were two, really, that stood out to me on DraftKings. They have these cross-sport specials under the Super Bowl type of tab. And one of which was Mahomes pass attempts versus Giannis points versus the Philadelphia 76ers. It is the front end of a back-to-back for the Milwaukee Bucks. And there were a couple things that I was weighing here. Mahomes hasn't really thrown the ball a ton during the playoffs. He's only had 25 and 26 pass attempts. However, Giannis has also not been scoring a ton against Philadelphia 76ers, only averaging 28.6 points per game. He's been a little bit better recently, and this is over 9 games over the last 3 seasons. He has had 30 points in 5 of the 9 games, but he's also had a couple down ones, 25, 25, 23, and 21. This line is set at Mahomes minus 120, Giannis plus 110, tie 12-1. I think that this is an interesting setting for a number of different reasons. One of which is I would imagine Joel Embiid plays, but I don't really know if Joel Embiid plays. If Joel Embiid doesn't play, that obviously helps the Giannis side of things. For Mahomes, this does feel like a game, again, where, they're probably going to try to continue running the ball. And that's just been what's been extremely successful for them. And even when these teams played in the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago, he only had 27 pass attempts. In the games that he's played against Philadelphia, he's had 30, 27, and 43. Obviously, we see like a 43 number. It's going to be a little bit tough. I'm very curious here, though, because his line is set at 36.5. Giannis's line is not going to be 36.5. Giannis's line is probably going to be like 31.5, maybe 32.5. So just in terms of like capping this in this perspective, right, Mahomes should, like, in theory, have the edge. Giannis, we're like continually projecting him right around that like 32, 33 range. I think the thing about Giannis is that his floor is generally like extremely high. When I'm looking at some of the projections for Mahomes in terms of like what we're trying to spit out here, like his pass attempts, I'm projecting closer to like 38, 39. I just think that for this play, even though Mahomes has not passed the ball a ton so far, right? I would imagine from the schedule spot that Embiid plays, I might hold this one and wait a little bit closer to kickoff, or at least get the Sixers through another game. Because right now, the Sixers schedule, he's already sitting out this back end of a back-to-back to the Miami Heat. They play again on Friday, and then they play on Sunday against Milwaukee. So I think it's likely that he plays in Detroit and then also in Milwaukee, but you really can never be 100% certain with Joel. I would want to wait almost as close as I can till the start of this game. If Embiid doesn't play, this is a clear Giannis spot, especially when you look at the way that the Chiefs have kind of been composed in terms of running the ball in the playoffs. I will say, though, on the season, Mahomes is averaging 35.1 pass attempts per game. So I think that all things being equal, you have to almost lean towards Mahomes on this line based on the situation and based on the, what his history has been. And the floor has been generally a little bit higher. Whereas Giannis, even though he's not going to have a dud, he's not going to be below really 20 or 25, right? But in order for him to really clear this comfortably, he would have to be closer to, 37, 38, 40 points. And even then he could lose. So I think that it's just the higher end outcome is less likely for Giannis than it is for Mahomes. And given the history, if Embiid does play, I think it's a little bit tougher. The other one that I was looking at was more first quarter points, Cade or the Chiefs. Cade is playing the Charlotte Hornets on, I think it's the day before. And the issue here with this line is the Chiefs, it's entirely possible they only get one possession in the first quarter, and then they might not even get a scoring opportunity in the first quarter. They basically have to score, in my opinion, they almost have to score a touchdown because Cade has been pretty solid against the Hornets this season. He's got 20 points, 27 points, 18 points. And when we look at his first quarter stats, he has, what does he got here this season? We look at Cade's first quarter stats. On the season, he was averaging 5.5 in the first quarter. But against the Hornets, he's been particularly strong, 4, 8, and 12. I think that this is a clear Cade bet here. Cade's line is listed at plus 100. The Chiefs are plus 120. Ty is plus 800. So it's a little bit interesting here because you could almost, as long as you said I don't think it's going to tie, you kind of punt that one and bet the other two, but I really wouldn't advise that. So Cade, I think, just inherently has the higher floor. He's going to score a couple points in the first quarter. And if the Chiefs just score nothing, it's basically an auto loss. So I like Cade here at plus 100. The only other one that I was looking at was Dallas Goedert, who will have more receptions, Dallas Goedert or Tyrese Maxey threes made. It's a void if Maxey doesn't start. Part of why I was looking at this was Goddard is an extremely popular play for this game. I know he was one of the first plays that really everybody was jumping all over this, right? His receptions line is at 4.5. And against the Chiefs over the past couple of seasons, he had 5 and 6, whatever. He just had 7 receptions against Washington. And I think that this is another spot where the floor for Goddard has basically been 4 over the past couple of weeks. For Maxey, he can really fluctuate pretty heavily from 3-point range. So for him to make, I know that there's obviously the option for a tie here. And for a tie, we have this listed as Goddard's minus 130, Maxey's plus 155, and a tie is 7-1. Obviously, you don't want to lose on a tie, but I do think that Maxey's end is a little bit more variable here, and Goddard's floor is higher. So I think that he has some ceiling given the matchup, and I know that his yardage prop has really gotten kind of steamed up. It opened at 45.5, and now we're seeing 54.5s even in the market. So I do think there's an opportunity or a better opportunity for Goddard to see a little bit more of a ceiling as opposed to Maxey, who even when he is scoring really well, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's scoring from 3-point range. He can be scoring by driving into the paint and attacking the rim. So for me, if I was looking at these Super Bowl cross-board props, I know people like them, I would be looking at Dallas Goedert to have more receptions than Tyrese Maxey threes made, Patrick Mahomes on the passing attempts versus Giannis's points scored, and finally, I would be looking at Cade Cunningham first quarter points more than the Chiefs first quarter points. So those are the 3 that I liked in the cross-sport market. Hopefully there's a couple more that pop up. They're pretty fun. I think that's a cool thing to kind of talk. All right, so let's start looking at the Wednesday NBA slate. We've got the Bucks versus the Hornets first. The Hornets are 9-point dogs. Giannis is questionable. Lillard's questionable. Lopez probable. Middleton, probable. Portis, probable. LaMelo's out. Micic is questionable. Mark Williams, again, maybe? No, I think this line is a touch high. I want to make sure, if Giannis doesn't go, sure. Love it. If Giannis is in, I'm very concerned about foul trouble. Mark Williams consistently gets into foul trouble lately. And he's been able to manage it pretty well, but I mean, it's been tough. Like, he's pretty much leaving the first quarter at least with one foul, if not two. They manage it okay. Still have some concerns. Additionally, I would look at Miles Bridges. Hate him, but look, the rebounds has been awesome for him, especially without some of these other guys. Without Brandon Miller, without LaMelo. If Mark Williams, gets into foul trouble, it obviously helps a little bit too. But I like over 8.5 rebounds. It's a number he's just been consistently hitting of late. Don't have a ton of thoughts in this game. Hornets have been a little feisty, but too many injuries for Milwaukee right now to fully assess. We've got the Cavs and the Pistons. The Pistons are 4.5-point underdogs. Honestly, I was kind of looking at Cade under 42.5 PRA. I'm right on the number. This is a really tough matchup for him against the Cavaliers. I understand that the Cavs are on a back-to-back. They just lost to Boston. Not sure if they're going to do anything with the rotation, if they're going to have some guys sit or, maybe play different minutes. But this has been a very, very tough matchup. It's hard for him to get rebounds. It's very difficult for him to get assists, I think, because just of who he's passing to and what the rest of the situation looks like for them. I have been on Malik Beasley kind of consistently in terms of his points and his threes. Cleveland just kind of limits those looks. So I have concerns here. To me, this is a Cavs game. There's a Mobley line out there for 17.5 points plus assists. Couple things. I don't really see any reason why Cleveland would sit players. He hasn't been great on this line against Detroit because of Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. And even though it's lower, it's only available on Bet365. And sometimes it's okay. You want to be able to take advantage of the best line. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But you want to be able to take advantage of the best line just because you see a line that's really good on one book compared to where the rest of the books are, that doesn't mean that you need to bet that line, right? You could try to middle it and you could try to take advantage of that. But I also think that sometimes it's not to your advantage because of the health of that account that you might need. If you have some other situations or some other books or a multitude of books or accounts, whatever, maybe that doesn't matter as much to you. But I think Bet365 is a really critical book to a lot of people's success, right? And I think it's an important book. I try to not personally cook that book if I don't have to. Sometimes there's spots where I'm I have to go this way. It's way better or dramatically better for whatever reason, and I really want this spot. Then yeah, sure, I think it's worth it. But just I don't feel very strongly about this play, so it's not something that I'm going to be looking at. It's not something that I want to go and just automatically go to Bet365 for to get the best line relative to the market when I don't necessarily believe in it. And I think that's an important thing too. If you're just shopping, comparing lines right across books, you can a lot of times find discrepancies. You can find different spots. You can find spots you want to middle or say well, this is the way the market is. This is the best value, etc. I don't really bet that way. I understand the people that do. I think that it's obviously very time consuming. And I think it's a different labor. And it's a different type of work that you have to put in. It's more about the market as opposed to what the plays are per se. So I think that is, it's admirable. It's just not the way that I'm trying to cap this. So the next game that this is going to bring us to, because I guess I should take a minute and talk about these trades. The Luka Doncic trade, I think, is one of the craziest trades I've ever seen. This was an objectively bad. I think it's just a bad trade. It was one of the worst trades I've ever seen in my life. I thought Shams was hacked. I thought that there was just no way this was real. I thought is Luka getting deported? What's going on here that we're trading Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis and a pick and Max Christie? Max Christie's good, but not the point. What are we doing? Instead, you now have Luka on the Lakers with LeBron James. I would imagine that they're going to make another move. I know that they're not now super concerned about this year because you have Luka. I think you are kind of going to assume that he's going to stay there, right? And I think you have to make a move. Like, you got to get another center, but you don't have to do anything crazy because you just traded for the next 10 years of your franchise. I think this was just an absolutely insane trade. Anthony Davis is about to be 32, and nothing about 32 years old. Like, I'm older than that, whatever. But your body's not the same. You're just getting towards the back end of your prime. You're getting to the back end of your career. Just truly not an ideal situation. Right? I am fascinated by the trade from a basketball perspective. I think that, LeBron and Luka are both two of the highest IQ basketball players in the world. I get that it might not work out. Ideally, there's going to be some growing pains. There's two guys that really need to be on ball. And then there's also Austin Reeves. But at the same time, you're putting, if you needed Luka to learn from anybody about keeping your body in shape and the longevity and some of the IQ things, or learning from somebody where you could I think that sometimes when you're really good at something and you're say the best at it and you go to learn from somebody else, it's hard to sometimes it's hard to learn from other people that aren't also of either your caliber or better than you at that, right? And the reason I say this is that sometimes there's certain things that you just can't know unless you've been that good or you've been in that situation. So for Luka, right, he plays this game, and he knows that pretty much at any given point in time, he is at least at worst the second best player on the floor. And he's been that way since he was 15. He was a Euro. It's insane, right? So, but now you get to learn from somebody that's also been in those shoes, and is in my opinion, I think he's the GOAT. I think LeBron's the GOAT. We'll put it out there. But he gets to learn from LeBron, and he gets to learn about all the things that come with keeping your health up. He gets to learn some of the things from a basketball perspective, from a passing perspective, that maybe you wouldn't learn from somebody else who's been so good, could dominate in terms of scoring, but also likes to assist, also finds ways to help his teammates. He's able to learn that from LeBron. So I think that there's a lot of potential here for Luka to improve. I don't want to say exponentially, but in a way that he might never have been able to had he not been paired up with LeBron. And I think that that's notable, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. So fascinated by the move. I think it's going to be, the ball movement's going to be great. The defense is going to be brutal, I think, unless they go out and get somebody, maybe a Nick Claxton, Clint Capella type, right? I think those would both be good fits. I'm going to be looking at, I think that Dorian Finney-Smith is going to be good in terms of his threes. I think Austin Reeves is going to be good in his threes. I think his assists are going to come down a little bit, but I think that the 3-pointers are going to be there as you get these situations where, LeBron's getting dribble penetration, but Luka can also be cutting. I think that Luka will probably be the primary on-ball player. We're going to see LeBron in a role that he's really never had to play, maybe a little bit with Wade and a little bit with Kyrie. Definitely not with Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis isn't that type of facilitator, right? And we're going to maybe see LeBron's assist pick up in a way, because I think that LeBron's going to be used a lot more as a cutter. He's such a smart basketball player, but it's going to be really the first time, I think, in his career that he isn't drawing the number one defensive assignment, which is fascinating, because I think that's part of the reason that his life has been so difficult too, even as old as he is now. And I'm fascinated to see how that works out, where you don't have the Lou Dorts or the, or a Jaren Jackson Jr., or I'm trying to think of these other great wing defense, an OG Anunoby. Those guys aren't going to necessarily be on LeBron. They're going to have to go cover Luka. And if you put those guys on Luka, what does that do for LeBron's game? And how much easier does that make his life now moving forward? And what does that open up for his game? I'm really, really interested to see it. I would think that his percentages are going to improve from a field goal percentage perspective. I think he's going to get set up a lot more. I think that his turnovers should go down. And I think that his assists will also spike a little, or at least remain static, because he's going to be able to cut and like find other people. Because one of the conversations that's been going around, one of the clips that's been going around is about how you can't blitz Luka, right? Because if you blitz Luka, he always finds the right player. What makes this even more interesting is that if you're blitzing at him or you're throwing doubles at him and he's able to find LeBron, then LeBron is going to be working with a court that's he inherently has an advantage with. So he's going to be able to dish. And like we're going to see a lot of hockey assists from Luka to LeBron or vice versa. So really fascinated to see this. I think that offense is going to hum. I think it's going to take maybe a little bit of time for an adjustment to be made for them to get used to playing with each other. But I think both players should be pretty excited about playing with each other. LeBron has always been a big Luka fan, and I'm fascinated by that trade. So very curious to see what other moves are made. The other trade, obviously, was the De'Aaron Fox trade. And De'Aaron Fox was moved to the San Antonio Spurs in what I thought was a fantastic trade for the Spurs. You were able to retain Devin Vassell. You were able to retain Jeremy Sohan. You kept a decent amount of your picks. And, you moved off of a couple players, but I think you kept the majority of your team intact. One of the biggest concerns that I had was that they weren't going to have enough shooting, they weren't going to have enough spacing, and they were able to keep Vassell. Critically important. Sohan covers a lot of different positions, can do a lot of things. He's a pretty flexible type of player. You're able to keep him. Maybe you can put him in like a more Josh Hardy type of role for this team. And I think that would be really, really valuable, right? De'Aaron Fox, I think, will thrive in this role. I don't think that he's ever really had a rim runner like Wemby. And I think his assists are going to be good. So one of the plays that I like is DraftKings has like the blockbuster trades tab under the NBA column. And one of them that I like was for him to record 15 assists in one game this season. He had 16 in one game last year. Hasn't had a 15 assist game yet this year. It's 14-1. He's had, I think, a 13 assist game so far this season. But again, he's never really had that player that you could just chuck it up to. And I think that the Spurs are going to play pretty fast. I think that he is going to be really, really useful in terms of driving through the paint, facilitating. He's not the same facilitator as Chris Paul. Clearly, not even going to try to debate it, right? Chris Paul has some monster assist games this season playing alongside of Wemby. And that's been on like slightly limited minutes. He's not playing like the most minutes of his career, and he's still dishing out all these dimes. I think that we're going to be able to get one game at 14-1 for Fox to have 15 assists. And that's the thing that I like about this. We just need one game. We're not betting on. I was looking at another one, and it was for him to record 15 double-doubles this season. He probably only has about 30 games left, and he's at 7, so he needs another 8. I don't know if I like that, because two of his 7 double-doubles are from rebounds, and I don't think we're going to get that in San Antonio. So he's only got 5 on dimes. And even if I like a little bit of a spike in assists, I don't know if I like it like that much where it's consistent. I think it's going to happen. Like, I think we're going to get the big assist game. But I don't know if we're going to consistently see 10 dimes a game. I think maybe we see like 7s and 8s a little bit more. But I don't know how much we see like double-digit assists. So that's my concern there. But it was something that I was looking at. So if you want to sprinkle it, go for it. It was 20-1. Then obviously you have, and I'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about this game, but the repairing of DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine with another European center. So I don't know. I think it's, like, I get it. LaVine's been good, but like, my God, like, what are you doing? Like, you just saw what went on in Chicago, and I get it. Like, whatever. People are saying, oh, well, like, they were good when Lonzo was healthy, blah, blah. That was fucking 3 years ago. Team's older. All these guys are older. Like, what are we doing? You can't compare that. It's irrelevant now. So I don't get it. I think it was a bad trade for pretty much everybody else involved. I think the Kings, all right, I'll rephrase. I think the Kings got about as much as they could get out of it. I don't think that they had a great situation. I don't like the pairing of DeRozan and LaVine, but I think that LaVine as an individual talent is fine to get kind of in this scenario. Chicago, idiots. Like, I don't know what they're doing. They've somehow traded all these players and gotten like no picks back. The craziest part about this trade was they got their own pick back that they traded to the Kings in the DeMar DeRozan trade, the pick was fucking top 10 protected. Right now on Tankathon, let me see this. The Bulls are projected to get the 8th pick in the drafts. So they traded away, they traded away talent in the first place, right? So they should in theory be worse. And then the pick they got back, they were probably going to keep anyway. Because it was top 10 protected. It just, like, the level of incompetence is insane. Just absolutely insane. So brutal, just absolutely brutal by Chicago. Just terrible, absolutely terrible. But I'll talk about the fit a little bit later. I do think that from a trade deadline perspective, we are going to see probably a couple more things. I think that if the Knicks don't make a move, or if they move like Sims or somebody like that out, then it means that Mitchell Robinson is coming back. He's healthy. If they trade Mitchell Robinson, I think that means they have big concerns about how healthy exactly he is. The Warriors apparently are involved with fucking everybody. Maybe some steam about Kevin Durant. I don't know. That pair, bringing him back to the Bay would be interesting. I would imagine it would take like a Kuminga picks type of scenario. I think Wiggins would have to be in there for money purposes. I do also think that it was notable that Wiggins, I don't think when the Warriors posted a picture of some of the guys like getting onto the plane or whatever, and Wiggins wasn't in that for this travel for today's game. So against Utah. So definitely something to monitor. So there's that. Then I also think that the trade that Philadelphia made to get Quentin Grimes was great. Just great trade. I love that move for them. I don't think that Martin is better. Caleb Martin is better than Quentin Grimes. And they got I think it was a great trade. I'm curious to see who, if anybody, makes a move on Kevin Durant. I'm curious to see where Cam Johnson goes. I would imagine that he's a piece that's going to go. And Miles Turner is another guy that's rumored to be on the block again. And then there's some stuff about Benedict Mathurin that I think like ownership wants to kind of get rid of him or move on from him. Questionable, I think. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then the other issue that we obviously have to keep an eye on is the Jimmy Butler situation. Miami kind of told Phoenix basically that if they can't figure out a trade, they're gonna ship him off somewhere. So curious to see exactly what that means, where he ends up. But I think that opens the door up for a lot of teams that Jimmy said, I don't want to go there. And maybe there's a little bit of a Kawhi situation where it's like, hey, you're gonna have a team trade for him. I feel like he's gonna opt in to the extra year because it's worth so much money. And then obviously this has just been an absolute shit show. But it does open the door maybe to a Golden State, a Milwaukee, a Memphis, maybe a Houston, maybe even a Denver. I don't know. So definitely really interesting to see and something to keep an eye on, but absolutely fascinated by the Jimmy Butler debacle or whatever you want to call it. And it can definitely have an impact on some of the moves that can go on and some of the player props that we can bet. We'll have to see. And based on some of the moves, we will try to be as proactive as we can in terms of betting and having good angles. Just kind of need to see where they all end up. So very curious, but it's going to be a fun trade deadline. We've already had a ton of big splashes here. So let me go into the rest of the slate and the Spurs and the Hawks. The Hawks are 4.5-point dogs. Fox is available to play. CP3 is questionable with his finger. Bogdanovich is out. Capella's out. Jalen Johnson's out. Trey is probable. I kind of think that this could be a spot where Fox tries to get into a real rhythm here. I don't think he's going to know the plays that well, but the one good thing is that he can score on his own pretty much at ease. And the other thing is, if you don't really know the plays, you know what you can still run? You can still run some pick and roll with an absolute alien in Victor Wembanyama. My projections don't have this as like a play really, but I do think that there's something maybe to a Fox like PA combo where it's maybe like 20 points and 5 dimes and see where that comes out at. I do like Victor Wembanyama over 23.5 points. I think it's a great spot for him against the Atlanta Hawks. They're obviously going to be without Capella. Okongwu is going to play a lot of minutes, which is fine. Okongwu is a little bit more switchable, but he's also not as big. So I do think that this is going to be a great spot for Wemby, who has actually kind of cooked against them of late. So he's had 21 points back in November of 23, January of last year. 26 points. And then in the December matchup this season, 42 points, just crushed. 13 of 24 from the field, 7 for 15 from 3-point range. So just absolutely torched them. And 23.5 points, I think, is light. He has hit that line in 54% of games this season. But we really have to look at it even more, is that Atlanta plays at one of the fastest paces in the league, bottom 10 in defense. Just a great opportunity for Wemby. I'm going to go over 23.5 points, would play 24.5 or 25 plus. Always be sure to shop it. The next spot that I'm looking at is the Grizzlies versus the Raptors. Raptors 7.5 point underdogs. Second end of a back-to-back for them. Desmond Bane's out. Brandon Clark is questionable. Marcus Smart's questionable. Vince Williams is questionable. So those are really three notable questionables for the Grizzlies. Raptors didn't have to submit their injury report yet. Would be curious to see whether Emmanuel Quickley plays or doesn't play. The other guy that you have to be concerned about is Jakob Poeltl. Poeltl left at halftime against the Knicks with an injury. And I think that it's probably probable, if not likely, that he doesn't play in this game. Zach Edey's PR line is set at 18.5. And I love this spot for him. I think that he's been kind of hot lately. He has hit this in 5 of his last 6 games, and he also hit this in both games without Brandon Clark. So Brandon Clark doesn't play. That's just an extra boost for him here. And when he played the Raptors earlier this season, 21 points, 16 boards in 27 minutes. I think it's a great spot. If Poeltl's in, I think that just means that, maybe you do need Edey's skill set in there. If he's not in, then I think it's just a really soft interior against the Raptors team that plays at a pretty fast pace. So I'd be looking at Edey over 18.5 PR. He's really been heating up lately. And additionally, if Memphis is involved in some sort of trade, right, and maybe they have to move a couple players tomorrow, or they're concerned about, maybe we don't want to play this guy. We don't want him to get hurt. We don't want this. Edey's not one of those guys. Edey's not going to be somebody that's really traded at the deadline. They just drafted him in the first round. I would be shocked if he was traded. And obviously, if he was, it'd be a void. But I do think that there's some potential for some of these other guys to sit or something to that effect. So just something to kind of remember, keep an eye on. I have no notes for the Wizards versus the Nets. It is the Nets' second game in as many days. Crazy, crazy win over the Houston Rockets. If you haven't seen the clip, you got to. It's 3-3 win for the Nets. Unbelievable victory. For the Wizards, you have to wonder, are they going to trade Valanciunas? Are they going to trade Kyle Kuzma? Maybe they don't play. Jordan Poole is definitely somebody maybe you could look at in this game. I don't have anything formally in that game yet. The Heat are playing the 76ers. Sixers are underdogs. Joel Embiid is not going to be playing. It's a back-to-back for both of these teams. If I had to look at a spot here, I would be looking at Tyler Hero assists. He's been really, really diming well lately. And Kel'el Ware, he cashed for us today in the first quarter. They bumped the lineup by 1. Might go back to the well there. Miami's been playing, the double big lineup. It's really been helping Bam with his rebounds. He's getting to play off of like power forwards instead a little bit. So might consider that against this Philadelphia team that has generally played a little bit smaller. I think the concern here for Ware props is that, does Miami continue to try to play this double big lineup where Philadelphia has been remaining smaller without Joel Embiid? So maybe you got to look for some Yabusele stuff because they're going to need his size on the court. It's going to be really hard to chop his minutes. And I like Hero to assists as well. Like I said before, he's just been diving really well lately, and I think he's going to be able to get into the teeth of the Sixers defense. You have to look at Maxey to a degree, but again, I still think Miami, given their pace, what they do defensively, it's not a great matchup. And I want to play the assists under, but I do think that Maxey's maybe somebody that can kind of bust up the zone a little bit, just given how shaky he is and how well he moves around the paint. The Bulls are playing the Minnesota Timberwolves. No Dante DiVincenzo, no Julius Randle. Not a ton of props up for this game just yet, given the back-to-back for Chicago. Buzelis has been awesome. So I'm not going to fault you if you go look at Buzelis, especially given the fact that no Levine there anymore. There's always the potential that, maybe Lonzo gets moved. there's potential that Vucevic gets moved. I think you could look at either of those guys if you really wanted to try to find an angle. What did I say wrong here? The one thing that I probably will look at from this game as well is the Gobert-Vooch matchup has been very successful for Rudy. I think you got to include the points. I would probably do PR. He hasn't rebounded as well this season. Generally, he also hasn't really scored as well this season. In the earlier matchup between these two teams, we had Rudy go 21-9 back in November. But generally, in his career against Vucevic, he's absolutely crushed. So I'm going to look at this basically the entire time Rudy's been Rudy. He's averaging 14.5 points, 14.8 rebounds against Vooch. It's just something you have to look at. So we'll see what this line opens up at. Like I said, we don't have anything just yet, but it's definitely something that I think you have to consider for this game. Next, we've got the Warriors versus the Jazz. Draymond's probably going to play. Kuminga's out. Moody's questionable. Wiggins, I talked about a little bit earlier. Jazz are missing a bunch of guys. You could probably look at Draymond's assists. I think that's definitely something that you could maybe take a look at. 4.5 assists, 5.5 assists. I think it's a good play either way. He's averaging 5.4 assists per game. This is a pretty good matchup, too, against the Jazz. Just weak defense. Maybe some guys aren't going to play, especially if they're traded. So always something to consider where, I think that there's certain players. Obviously, if Draymond got traded, then, like I said, it voids. But it's always good to look at some players and say, okay, well, I don't think this guy is getting traded. There could be a lot of people getting moved around him, but if he stays, how does that impact him? So that's why I would look at, a Draymond prop in this game. The Pelicans against the Nuggets. This is a matchup we just had the other day, and we were looking at the Nuggets are -10. It's basically a replay. Pretty much everybody is in the same situation for, who's playing, what's it what the injury report looks like. I grabbed Jokic triple-double last game. He hit that legacy cash in the fourth quarter. I think he had 4 assists right at the end. Great cash for him. I'm going to play that again. I'm going to look and see where triple-double really opens at places. Right now, it's -200 on FanDuel, so it's a little bit high. I do think it's a good way, again, to get his assists down from 10.5 to 10+. The biggest thing for me is without Westbrook, Jokic jumps to 12.7 assists per 100 jumps from 12.7 assists per 100 to over 14.4 without Westbrook. So I think it's a great spot. I'm going to see how I can build it out best and what that situation looks like. But last game, he only had 10 dimes, but he had 24 potentials. So he really should have had more success, to be honest with you. So if I can't get that, I'll probably grab 10.5 assists, or I might even go for PR for the point, or PA rather, for Jokic. I think it's going to be a great spot for him. Then we've got the Suns versus the Thunder. Obviously, there's all these KD rumors going around, so I think that's why Book's lines are a little bit inflated. Jalen Williams is questionable for the Thunder. The player that I'm going to target is Isaiah Hartenstein. I like over 11.5 rebounds. I also like double-double. The 11.5 rebounds is even money. The double-double, if you build it out on Bet365, is +105 either way, or double-double is +100. I kind of split my bet on this. He's averaging 11.7 points and 12.4 rebounds per game, double-double in 62% of games this season. The history against the Suns is not good, but it's just wholly irrelevant. Totally different personnel, totally different team, totally different role for Hartenstein. So the thing that I looked at was earlier this season, Hartenstein actually played a game against the Hornets where Nick Richards played. And in that game, Hartenstein had 12 points and 15 rebounds and double-double. So I think it's a spot the Thunder take care of business. I think it's a spot for Hartenstein to also take care of business and be a critical part of that success. So I'm going to go there. Then we've got the Magic versus the Kings. Kings are 5.5-point favorites. Jalen Suggs is doubtful. And I think that that's pretty important for, what the Kings are going to try to do. LaVine is back with DeRozan, so they obviously have a little bit of, rapport, I guess, playing with each other. But what a mess. Over the last 2 seasons, LaVine with and without DeRozan. With DeRozan, 19.5 points, 5 boards, 4 dimes. Without him, basically 24 points per game, 4.8 rebounds, 4.5 assists. So basically a 4.5 point jump playing without DeRozan. It's a pretty big swing. I think a lot of it, though, might have to do with the fact that he's shooting almost 45% from three this season. So I'm curious to see if he's able to keep that up, especially with Orlando not having Jalen Suggs. There's actually this is going to be a tougher matchup, I think, for Orlando. Paolo's kind of been struggling. This Kings team is tough. This Kings team is a little bit wonky. I don't feel super strongly about them. I think that one of the spots that I was curious about was I was looking at, Malik Monk last game, and he had 5 assists like right away in the second quarter, and I thought it was going to be a great spot. Finished with 5. He only had 9 potentials last game. 9 potentials for him, 9 potentials for DeMar. DeMar had a better conversion rate at 7. I think that Levine probably picks up some of the slack there, but Malik Monk is should be the clear primary facilitator on this team. We'll see if it translates. I was hoping that maybe we get a lower line after the 5-assist game, but it's back at 6.5 again. I'm a little nervous to play it, given that it's against Orlando. They play slower. The defense is good overall. But it's definitely something I'm going to be curious to see how the assists are kind of distributed on this Kings team now without De'Aaron Fox. And if there's a way for Monk to either retain that, or if it's just going to get distributed against everybody once again. So definitely something I'm going to keep an eye on. But yeah, so that's it for now. We're going to come back, obviously, later today. We're going to have Coast to Coast, me and Andrew Watts. So that's going to be fun. The live show presented by Rhythm. That's going to be great. So definitely be sure to tune in. Really tried to cover as much as I could today. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, it's getting a little late for me, but I'll touch on it a bit. But there was a conversation on Twitter about juice and juice betting and whether or not you should do it or you shouldn't do it. One of the things I think that people tend to forget is all odds are tied to a certain level or a certain implied probability. And I feel like I've had this conversation a couple different times on the show, but basically if you have something at plus 100 odds, it's 50%. That's the implied probability. If you have something at minus 200, it's 66.7. Minus 300, 75%, and so on and so forth. A lot of times people want to combine a couple minus 200s, some minus 300s, and get something that's plus 100 because they're just I'm going to bet $100. I want to win more than the $100, or I want to win $100 and I don't want to have to bet or stake a lot in order to get that. And at the end of the day, I get it. I'm not somebody that, I have a service. I'm not trying to go tell people to go bet minus 500s, on a regular basis or something like that. A lot of times, the most you'll see me lay is maybe a minus 250 or something. But they're also, to me, I don't usually see too many bets where I'm I definitely want to bet that minus 500. I think that there's a lot of value there. It's not really happening, right? On the flip side, I think that, you can also have plus EV bets the other way, where you could say, all right, well, this is 10-1, or let's use the Fox example for what I talked about before. The De'Aaron Fox bet, he was 14-1 to record 15 assists in one game. That's 7% implied. I think that I have a better than 6.7% chance to get this. I think that, let's call it, I think it's double. I think it's 12%. So I would have it at plus 700 is what I think maybe the fair line should be. And I have an edge there. That's the way that I'm capping it, because on a variety of different factors, right? I'm kind of spitballing some numbers here. I'm trying to use some round numbers. There's a conversation about, how to calculate that edge. I think that the best way you can really calculate is you say the difference in probability. So it's about, let's call it about a 6% difference in probability. So it's about a 6% edge, right? And then based on that, you should weigh your bets, or, adjust your wager amount and how much you risk. And it's all relative to your bankroll, whatever. I think that what happens is it's possible to have bets that are plus money that have this type of expected value. I think that they're a lot rarer than you would expect. A lot of times that we see people being these plus money spots are, alt lines on a ladder, for example. And I think the problem is that when you do that, is that you anticipate a really good outcome for a particular player. And like you think that this player is going to excel. You think that this player is going to have an amazing game. So like let's say we're talking about Dame, right? And let's say Dame's points prop is at 25. And you think this is going to be a great spot for him. He's going to score 40 points this day. And the problem is that the 40-point line is sometimes it's only like plus 500. So it's got implied odds of 16, 17%, right? And that doesn't really align with what is actually going to happen. Like you could think it, you could have it capped well, you could have all those angles done, but just because like you think that's going to happen and you have like really good analysis for it, if it's one thing if you are just saying like fuck it, I don't really care. I think that this is the right play for all these reasons that I've elaborated in, like whatever my write-up is, my analysis is, whatever. But a lot of times like you're not taking like say like the deviations of what a Dame performance would be. And you're not saying that he's going to do this, 16%, like more than 16% of the time. Like you have him actually doing it at say 22 or like 25% of the time, right? Where you'd actually have like a real discernible edge of say like 9%. Instead, like you might be saying it's like, yeah, like I could totally see him doing that, even 1 out of 5 times, because that's, then you're getting your money back, right? Like if he does it 1 out of every 5 times and you bet $100 each time, you're getting your money back because it's 5-1, right? You're not going to be profitable betting that way. And it doesn't really align with, and even then your edge is say only 3%. Is 3% enough for you? And then are you staking it properly? Probably not. So I think that that's one of the problems that people tend to have, right, with betting some of these higher alts and like some of these bigger numbers. The other thing is especially with some of these guys that you like, the stars, right? Their lines are so inflated generally that it's hard to get a projection that's like higher than what their line is set at, right? And the floor is pretty high because they're going to play a lot more minutes. They're going to see a lot of time on the court, right? And there's a lot of ways you could lose. Like you could lose it with an injury, you could lose with a blowout. But basically, in order for them to even clear the baseline, they have to have, say, like a 55, 60th percentile game. In order for them to go over those like really high alts, you're looking at a lot of times like a 90th percentile game. And if you're doing it based just on the cap, that's fine. But you need to really couple the cap with the math behind it. And it's kind of hard to explain in like layman's terms, so to speak. Like I'm not a mathematician, but I understand the math of betting enough, right? That a lot of times you're betting on, at a certain point when you keep taking this ladder up, you are betting on feel. And like, you could have, okay, so let's say, maybe this is a better way to put it. You could have, if somebody's baseline is set, we'll go back to Dame, at say 25 plus, and you think that there is it's plus 100, and you have it at like 65% that he goes over that. So you have a pretty marketable edge, right? You should bet that. It doesn't always scale up, is what I'm trying to say. So just because you have like a 65% probability that Dame goes over the baseline doesn't mean that you then have like it's progressive up. Like it doesn't mean then that it's naturally going to scale to 30, 35, 40. That's not the way that this works in terms of the like what the outcomes are for a particular player, right? So just because he scores 25 doesn't mean that he always then scores more or like he has these big games. Whereas I think if you look at some of the players that have lower lines, you're able to capture a little bit more of this volatility, right? Because a guy like Dame or a guy like Giannis or a guy like Shea, they're already seeing a shitload of usage on a nightly basis. There's not a lot of reasons why they're going to see more on a particular night, right? There could be a good matchup, And maybe that helps. Or it could be like a pace-up game, and that can help. Or against a really bad defense, whatever. Those things can help. When you target some like smaller players or players with lower lines, they're more volatile because a lot of times the floor isn't there. And like you have a lot of downward trajectory. But at the same time, if somebody gets hot, like for Denver, for example, like Julian Strawther, right? Strawther is somebody where if he gets hot, he's given some extra run. And it's like a cascading effect where if he does hit, say, like his points line, say at like 7.5, if let's say he does hit the 7.5 line, it becomes more, it's like almost more likely that he's then going to open up more minutes for himself and Malone's going to keep him on the floor. So it's driving the probability higher because he went over the 7.5. For a guy like, say, Shea, and his line is set, 32.5 points, it almost like him scoring 32.5 points doesn't improve the chances that he's going to score 50. For a guy like Strawther, if he scores 7.5, it kind of improves the fact that he might score 10 or 15 because he's going to be on the floor more. He's going to see more minutes. And I think that that's something that a lot of people forget and a lot of people overlook in their analysis of betting some of these alts. On the flip side of this, right, on like the really minus end, you could have a player where you say, you look at what the situation is and you're saying like the LeBron 10 plus points thing, right? They keep putting out these like insane numbers and he just keeps scoring that many points, right? You almost have to, like, you can look at something and say, like, if they gave me LeBron 10 plus points pre-flop, pre-game at minus 500, the implied probability is 83.3%. He's literally done this for like decades. You're going to have a huge edge. Like the implied probability should basically be almost 100 and you're going to have a big edge. That doesn't make the minus 500 a bad bet because you had to lay $500 to win 100. It might make you a little bit more uncomfortable because you're staking more than you're maybe used to typically staking, right, to win a unit. But at the same time, that doesn't make it a bad bet. It probably means that your unit structure is fucked up and you're not betting like, like in like a real bankroll management type of way. You're so used to saying, well, like a lot of people say like a unit should be 1% of your bankroll or like 1 to 3% of your bankroll. So if you have, like $100 unit, you have like a $10,000 bankroll, right? So people are like, well, they're like, well, I'm uncomfortable betting 5% of my bankroll to win back 1%. I want to only bet, say, like a 0.5% to win back 1 or 2 or 3% of the bankroll. And I get that that's like the way that your brain is wired, but that doesn't mean that it's good betting. And it's important to understand the direct relationship between the implied probability and the lines that are being offered. It's critically important, and it's something that you really need to consider in terms of whether or not you think that something's a good bet. If you're betting for fun, whatever, do whatever you want to do. I mean, like, try to be smart about it, but like, I understand that you're going to not make the best decisions. Like, you're not going to always make an EV decision. Not every decision that you make even has to be EV, but at the same time, you should try, I think, and if it gives you a better construct. You're already working harder against the books generally. So you really should try to use your best practices in order to give yourself the best opportunity to be successful and to make money and win. Because I think that's the point. The point of it is to make money. The point of it is to win. And, you want to be right in terms of your process. And, sometimes like you throw in a lotto, you would do this, you do that. Like you got to do a couple things for account health, whatever. That's all part of the game, right? That's all part of the business. But you also don't need to be dumb about some of these lines when they're offering things. You're like, yeah, that looks good. Like that could happen. Or this seems like good odds. Or like, yeah, I definitely have to take that, without doing a little bit of the calculation on the other side saying like, well, like, I don't know if maybe that's really that great of a bet. So that's my conversation about lines and odds and implied probability, whatever. For pods and recs, I have a quick one. I'm going to recommend I always love Costco. You guys know that. And I went to Costco today and I got not the rotisserie chicken. Rotisserie chicken is always a staple, whatever. They had the wings in the rotisserie section where they make them and you take home the wings yourself. Dynamite. I thought they were great. It was $18 for almost 3 pounds. So felt like a good deal. They tasted good, and just a huge fan of pretty much anything that Costco does. So really, really thrilled with that purchase. Would recommend to you guys. And the other thing that I would recommend, because I think that those wings were a plus EV decision, one of the ways that you can try to help calculate your EV and your edge and your difference to market is with Rhythm. And this show is brought to you by Rhythm. You can get it for a week for free, and then you get 25% off your first month with the link in the bio. Use it, love it, in your phone, on your computer, wherever you need it. And you can get Rhythm, like I said, at a discount from me. And be sure to join the huddle, subscribe, keep supporting me, keep supporting us and the work we do. I appreciate it. I think that we're putting out some good content for you guys. And if you support me, it helps me put out more work so that we can continue to cash that.